Hi students, today we will discuss another concept in research which will be your data collection methods, validity and reliability. Now before we can describe what a good data collection method would be and what is reliability and validity, we have to recall our research designs which we discussed last week. Okay? So for this lesson, we will try to identify the good qualitative or the good characteristics of a quantitative design. No? When we talk of characteristics of good quantitative design, this would fall if they have good statistical conclusion validity. That's the first one, which talks about the statistical power, no, or the size of our sample and the differences in our group. No, there should be maximum group differences between for a good quantitative design so that we can cover a representative sample for all for our results and even the strength of intervention. Another characteristic of good quantitative design is your internal validity, which refers to the characteristic where the there is really a cause and effect relationship between your variables. No? Sa madaling salita, if X is really the cause of Y, if there is a good causal effect, okay? If it answers the question, the internal validity characteristic answers the question, is is my intervention really the cause of my expected outcome? Okay? If it answers that, then you have a good internal validity characteristic. Okay? When we talk of on the other hand, when we talk of external validity, this refers to your generalizability of your findings. If the findings that you have from your sample size is applicable or generalizable to the population it represents. Okay? And fourth, no, characteristic of good quantitative design is your construct validity. Okay? Or the measurement or how you measure your variables. Okay? This pertains to the type of questions, questionnaires, data collection tools that you use for your study. Now, earlier we talked about internal validity, no? When we say internal validity, sabi natin kanina, this refers to your internal characteristic, no? Of whether your study establishes a good causal effect, no? Sa madaling salita, is my intervention really the cause of the change in my outcome? So, there are several threats to that we need to take note, no, when we conduct or perform or design our research. No? The first is selection bias. When we say selection bias, this is the preference, no, of the respondents to choose whether they want to be in a experimental group or a control group. No? Their preference would influence how they respond. Definitely yes. Lalong-lalo na kapag bago yung kanilang mararanasan or matatanggap or the intervention that they will receive. No? For example, if there is a study about nursing students for online learning using laptops and tablets, or rather tablets, no, and laptops, those who volunteered, no, without randomization, those who volunteered for the laptop or for the tablet group would rate the tablet group or the tablet outcomes better than those who did not who are using the conventional one because of the element of selection preference. Okay? So if they influence their preference into the outcome, the results might be biased. All right? So that's a threat to internal validity. Another threat to internal validity is what you call your history factor. No? When we say history factor, these are circumstances that happen at the same time when you conduct your study. And these circumstances have something to do with the outcomes you are observing on a certain group of people. So how does it play? For example, no? For example, if nursing or if you are conducting a smoking cessation program in a group of third-year nursing students. And then at the same time, there's a information cessation campaign, no, running in your school during the time of your data collection or implementation. Would you think would you think or would you do you think, no, may epekto yung smoking cessation program ng school doon sa inyong outcome? Definitely yes. So therefore there's a question whether your smoking cessation program, no, yung ginawa mo, has an effect doon sa outcome na nakuha mo. So there's a threat, no, to internal validity. So that situation reflects, no, your history threat. Okay? The third threat to internal validity is your maturation. Okay? Maturation refers to the natural process, no, of obtaining the same outcome that you are studying. For example, you studied a healing cream, whether it hastens, no, the healing of wounds. But then we all know that all people have the capacity to heal wounds. So if the patient exhibits wound healing, uh, it may be it may not be about the healing cream that you are studying, but rather it can be caused by a maturation factor, which is your bodily mechanisms, no, for healing wounds. So that is a threat to internal validity. Hindi mo alam kung yung intervention mo ba yung nag-cause ng outcome or just a natural process towards that outcome that you are observing. Okay? Another threat to internal validity or a causal relationship is yung pagpapalit-palit ng instrument sa pagsukat ng outcome or what you call your instrumentation change. When you frequently change instruments to measure a certain outcome, there is a chance that your changes may be caused by not your intervention but rather by the instruments that you have used. No? For example, you measured your BP, no, from an aneroid sphygmomanometer to a digital sphygmomanometer. There can be differences between the two, and that difference causes change. That change is a threat, is not actually by an intervention that you may have given earlier, but rather a change that is caused by the instruments you used. So that explains your instrumentation change. Testing, on the other hand, is a threat to internal validity because your test may impose some new ideas that may change the perception of a person. Ito nga ang classic example dito, yung pre-test and post-test. When you do a pre-test before a teaching method, no? When you do a pre-test before a teaching method, chances are the contents of the pre-test may be retained doon sa taong nag-take ng pre-test. Then, it may be carried over when he takes the post-test. Question, is the pre-test, is the intervention, which is the teaching method, really is the cause of the change, no, in the post-test scores? Hindi natin masabi kasi nag-administer tayo na pre-test. That exhibits the testing threat to internal validity. When we say mortality, this is the threat to internal validity when participants drop out from your study. No? There can be changes in responses because maraming participants ang hindi nagbigay ng data, which causes change in your observations. Now, mortality therefore affects, no, the changes the data that you have. So therefore, it may be different. It may cause difference other than your intervention. Okay. Now, external validity refers to the generalizability of your findings. Okay? One threat to external validity is yung population validity. Minsan kasi our sample may not be representative of the population. Therefore, if it's not representative, then chances are we cannot generalize our findings to the population that we get. So we have to make sure whether our population is valid, no, and our sample is valid, so that we get valid results. The next type of external validity or threat to external validity is what you call your Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne came from an electrical company, no, in the US. Now, the Hawthorne study is actually the source, no? Is actually the source of this term, the Hawthorne effect. Now, the Hawthorne study, when it was conducted, it aimed to increase the productivity of the people, no, of that company, of that Hawthorne company, Hawthorne Electricals, no? So, one of the ways they have proposed, no, doon sa Hawthorne company is to increase the lighting of the facility. So when they increase the lighting, they have observed that productivity has increased. So therefore, they concluded that we need to increase the lighting. Months after the study has finished, the study has concluded, the production rate in Hawthorne Electrics went back to the original stage. No? So the Hawthorne effect would tell you that they found out that those people who were observed were actually moving again, moving or behaving, no, because of the fact that they are being observed, are behaving differently because of the fact that they were being observed. So uh, it's Hawthorne effect means the tendency of people, no, the tendency of people to have to change their behavior because of the fact that they know they are being observed. All right, so this can be a threat to external validity because there are changes, no, that were caused by some external factors which we cannot attribute to our population, where we want to generalize our findings. Okay? The third effect is your novelty effect, or the tendency of a person to give higher ratings to newer or novel interventions. No, ito yung tendency ng isang tao na paboran, no? Yung bigyan ng pabor or should be in favor of a treatment or of an intervention that is new to them. Okay? Another threat to external validity is what you call your experimental or Rosenthal effect. Okay? Or the effect or the tendency of a person to behave, no, to what a person or to what the experimenter is imposing. For example, you are interviewing someone of smoking cessation, and then you wore a dress, no, or you wore a shirt. Okay, you put on a shirt that says, "I hate smoking." Okay, and when you put that, you interview the person about the topic smoking. Experimenter effect would take into place because your influence overshadows your client's response, your respondent's answers, because of the fact you have no your you have imposed your influence over them. So I leave to you to read about the measurement effect and the placebo effect. Okay? Now, here are some of the research controls that you need to employ so that you'll get a good no a good research outcomes, no, or you can measure outcomes. Okay? The primary the things that we want to control in a research are: number one, your external or extraneous variables, which can be controlled, no, by setting controls on the environments or your setting, no. We even consider the time of the day or the year when we conduct our research, no. There's one research what that we did, no. There's one research that we did about alcohol consumption, no, and alcohol consumption and smoking, no, among students. Okay? So the students did the research, no, during the Christmas break. Okay? So one of the questions there is that would the rise in the smoking and drinking patterns or alcoholic drinking patterns of students affected by the time of the year that you conducted your research? Definitely, yes. No? It will change the way they respond because we all know during this season, okay, during the times of Christmas season, holiday seasons, no, you you change your drinking or almost all people change their drinking and smoking patterns during this time of the year. So it may affect how they collect data or how they respond to your survey. Okay? So you have to control that external factor if you want to get consistent results. Okay? And also, you need to control communication or research protocols, no, with fidelity. Ibig sabihin, you have to be faithful, no, in doing your research protocols. If one person or if one of your group mates do it like this, you also have to do it like what your other group mates are doing, so that you will be consistently implementing your research. Dapat pare-pareho kayo ng alam, dapat pare-pareho kayo ng ginagawa. There's also an internal control, no? Internal control or controlling intrinsic factors or your subject characteristics. Number one, we do randomization. Sabi nga natin, the best way to minimize, no, bias will be randomization. Okay? Randomization in sampling, nabanggit na natin na yan, and randomization in selection or random selection or sa pagpili ng group. Okay? May other controls din tayo na ginagawa, which is homogeneity, no, or homogenizing our population, meaning we try to limit the variation in characteristics of your respondents so that you'll hopefully get results, get results that are consistent. Paano mo masasabi na consistent yung result? If your standard deviation is small, no, less than 1. Okay? Less than 1. Now, matching is also one way to control intrinsic factors, no? When we do matching, we match the characteristics, no, to the type of intervention that they will receive. Okay, that's matching. We can also do statistical control, no? We compute for the level of significance, margin of error, etc. Okay? We also do blinding. When we say blinding, we do not know which is the intervention group or the control group. There can be 3 levels of blinding. No? 3 levels of blinding. The first level of blinding or yung single blindedness or single blinded studies are studies that blinds the participants from knowing which is the control group and the intervention group, no? Or pwede rin na they don't know what is the intervention or what is the experimental treatment. Okay? So blinding, that's the first level of blinding. The second level of blinding, which is double-blinded study, hindi alam ng participants kung ano ang control treatment at kung ano ang experimental treatment. Hindi niya alam yon. Likewise, yung nag-o-observe sa kanila, hindi alam kung ano ang experimental sa control treatment. And even the experimental group and control group. Basta ang alam lang ng observer kung sino ang na mayroong dalawang treatment, may dalawang protocol na inoobserbahan. Okay? The third level of blinding, which is seldom used, is yung pagbablind pati sa evaluator ng results. No? So, blinded yung respondents, blinded yung observers, yung evaluator ng outcomes, blinded din. So that bias will not come into play. Usually, clinical trials because of the nature of its extent sa buhay ng tao, no, maapektuhan yung gamot ng buhay ng tao, they employ the maximum control in intrinsic factor. Gumagamit sila ng randomization, gumagamit sila ng homogeneity, gumagamit sila ng matching, statistical control, and even blinding. No? Lahat ng control ng intrinsic factor dahil buhay ng tao ang pwedeng maapektahan kapag mali ang research outcomes ginagamit. Okay? So, let's try to identify the types of threats to validity. So, the first one says that my BP reading using the aneroid sphygmomanometer is 5 millimeter mercury higher than using the mercurial apparatus. No? So this one is instrumentation change, a threat to internal validity. Number 2, I like to be in the experimental group. This example, no, it illustrates selection bias. Number 3, this research is taking too long to finish. I quit. The word I quit means he wants to drop out. Therefore, this is a threat to internal validity. No, this is a mortality factor or mortality threat. Okay? Number 4, I have been a participant in this study for 10 years already. I've grown so much since then. The word I've grown so much would reflect maturation. No? So therefore, number 4, this is a maturation effect. Number 5, someone is studying about us. We better behave. This exemplifies your Hawthorne effect. So we're done with the different controls, with different threats to internal and external validity. We now go to identifying the type of instrument that we use, no, for our research. No? Now, instrumentation can come from different sources. It can come from your review of literature. It can come from books or journals, no, with actual copy of the instrument that you will use. Okay? It can be a tool developed by other researchers, or if you can't find one, you develop your own tool, or even modify an existing tool. Take note, if you develop your own tool, it should undergo a different set of study to measure its validity and internal consistency and reliability. So that would take a lot of time, no? It would take a lot of time before you can use your own tool. So developing your own tool is quite tedious, so it's not recommended, no, for undergraduate research, no, the ones that you will be conducting. But rather, you will use, no, some actual copies of the instrument, no, or even modify it a bit with the permission of the author. Just make sure that when you use an existing or tested instrument, you have to ask, no, permission from the author. Usually, you can find the author's contact details, no, doon sa kanyang article. You can find his email address sa kanyang article. You can contact him, no? Lalo na buhay pa naman yung mga nasa year 2019, 2018 or whatsoever year, no, na may gawa ng title. But if you cannot find, no, your the permission for to whom you should ask permission for your tool, you can go to copyright.com, no? You can try to ask for permission, no, create a permission for your test, for your tool, no, na gagamitin mo. Okay? Usually hindi naman yan naniningil ang mga authors, no? Authors do not charge fees if they know that you are students, no, for an undergraduate program degree, no? So you should explain yourself to them that you are going to use their paper or their tool for you to conduct research, no, in your undergraduate studies as a part of the requirement of your undergraduate studies. Okay? Now, ito nga yung sinasabi ko kanina, if you develop your own tool, you need to do a methodological research design. So to test for your reliability and validity. Okay? Now, data collection method can vary in four key dimensions. No? When we say structure, this is the form. No? Form. When we say the more structured, no, the more structured a research questionnaire or a research instrument is, or a data collection method is, the more structured it is, the more quantifiable it is. No? Or the more structured it is, the more form or the more questions or expectations you're looking for. Okay, it can be classified, no, or characterized by its quantifiability o yung capability to count, no, capability to count your or measure your variables of by numeric variables, no. Obtrusiveness, ibig sabihin, it's yung pagiging obvious, no, sa pag-collect ng data. Okay? Or it can be classified or characterized by objectivity or how realistic, no, or how realistic your measurements would be. Okay? Now, the first data collection method that we will discuss is what you call your observation or the use of your senses, no, senses in collecting data. It can be in the form of an observer. It can be in the form. It can be classified, no, according to the participation of the observer, yung taong nag-observe. It can be a participant observation, meaning you as an observer, you take part in the things that you are observing. No? Ang best example dito would be an immersion sa community. Tapos mag-observe ka sa community when you live, no, their life. So that's a participant observation. When you do a non-participant observation, you try to distance yourself, no, from the things that you are observing. Okay? So you distance yourself from that. Okay? Now there's a type of community health technique that goes, no, that is exemplified by a non-participant observation, which is your windshield observation. No, pag sinabing windshield observation, you just pass by around the community and then observe, look around the community to know what their condition is. Okay, so that's a non-participant observation. You do not take part on the thing that you are observing or on the data phenomenon that you are observing. No? The second type of the second classification of observation is yung type of data that you are observing. You say that you're doing a structured observation when you do an observation based, no, sa objectives or sa list, no, may listahan ka ng inoobserbahan mo. So if you do not see anything, no, outside the checklist that your observation checklist, then that's a structured observation. But if you observe everything under the sun and you do not follow a certain itinerary for observation, then you're doing an unstructured observation. Another type of observation is or classification rather is your timing, no, of observation. It can be in the time sampling, no? Pag sinabing time sampling, pipili ka ng oras na oobserbahan mo yung isang tao. Okay? So it can be in the morning, no? During lunch, no? During dinner. You try to observe the people, no? That's time sampling kasi kumukuha ka ng time para obserbahan yung tao. But when you say event sampling, you're looking for a certain event, no? For a certain event you're looking for a certain event, no? For a behavior to occur. No? For a behavior to occur. For example, sa isang nursery, you try to observe, no, the people or the parents who are viewing their babies in the nursery. Okay? So if you are trying to observe their smiles, no, their interaction with their baby, and during that time na ikaw ay gumawa ng observation ay doon sa kanilang observation time, viewing time, then that's an event sampling. No? You observe the event, you observe the characteristics of the people, during that event. Some ethical consideration when doing observation is that when you try to observe people, it may invade their privacy, no? Lalo na when we try to conceal, no, our observation because we want to observe them as natural as possible. Okay? So that's one ethical consideration. Okay? So another is you have to also get the consent of the people that you are observing. But how will you but if the problem is if you get the consent at first, no, nung taong inoobserbahan mo, that violates already, no, your their that already imposes a Hawthorne effect on them, 'di ba? So to properly address this or to properly resolve this dilemma, we have to if we want to do an observation, we may observe, no, in a concealed manner, but when we are done with our observation, we have to ask the permission of the person who we observe, no? And if the person consented, we can include that data in our data set. However, if that person who we observed did not consent for that or for our observation, we cannot include that into our data set. Now, when we record our observation, we can always use our notes, no? Okay, we can have a log or a field diary, which is a record of our events and conversations that we have. Or we can have field notes, which is broader, more analytic, and more interpretative. Field notes can be characterized or itemized into following. No, it can be a descriptive or observational note, which are objective, thick description of what transpired, including textual info of time, place, actors. So you try to write down what happened, no, during the day, no, and even the time, place, and actors that have participated into your conversation or interaction. Another type of note is what you call your reflective note, or a record of your personal experience, your personal reflection and progress while in the field. So if it involves some of your reflections, some of your opinions, then that's a reflective note. Another type of note is your theoretical note, no, which is an interpretation, no, interpretation and attaching meanings to your observation. While methodologic notes refer to instructions or reminders about how subsequent observations will be made in the future. If you make notes, no, on how you will observe a certain person in the future, that's a methodologic note. While personal notes are your comments, no, about your own feelings during the research process. Okay? So, magkaiba po siya sa reflective note kasi pag personal note, yung research process ang kinokomentan mo. So, for example, kailangan ko improve ang aking data collection, that's the research process. That is a personal note. But if you try to reflect what's going on the field, no? Okay, that's a reflective note. So that's the difference between the two. Another type of data collection is what you call your self-reports. Now, self-reports can be in the form of interview, questionnaire, scales, vignettes, Q-sorts, projective tests. When we say interview, this is a conversation. We collect data through conversation. It can be done through face-to-face or through telephone or pwede rin naman through internet calls, no? Through internet calls. It can be structured, no? Ibig sabihin, meron ka lang itatanong sa list ng itatanong or list of questions for your participant, no? Or your interviewee. It can be semi-structured, meaning there's some general questions, no? And some follow-up questions to guide you in your in your interview, and an unstructured interview, which is an interview of anything under the sun and how your conversation goes. Now, it will be helpful, no, to record your notes or to record your interview by audio. Okay? Because you need to transcribe it so that you can analyze it, no, qualitatively. Okay? Now, it can be recorded in audio, it can be recorded via video, no? Video is better than audio recording. However, in video recording, you have to transcribe also the facial expressions, no? The facial the gestures, no, of your interviewee. You have to transcribe it as well, or even take down notes. Okay? Just make sure that when you record an interview, you have to ask for permission, okay, from the respondent. But if they don't want to be recorded, then that would be fine. That should be fine with you. Now, interviews can have interview guide and interview schedule. O, sabi nga natin, when we try to face our informants or respondents, there's a chance that they may be intimidated or influenced by our personality. So your interviews can be affected by your Rosenthal or experimenter effect. Okay? Another type of self-report data collection method is your questionnaire. Your questionnaires are actually applicable only for literate, no, for literate respondents. Kasi kung hindi sila makabasa, you cannot gather information from them. This is useful because this is a method where we ask questions to the respondent impersonally, okay, impersonally, and then get, no, something from them by ensuring their confidentiality and anonymity. No? Also, questionnaires are efficient way, no, to collect data because bibigay mo lang yung you can only give the questionnaire and you get it back from them. All right? Speaking of advantages and disadvantages and the ways, no, in doing data collection, let's go back to interviews. No, interviews should follow a manner of questioning. No, when you try to do an interview, always make sure that you spark interest to your interviewee. You start questions, no, that spark greater interest to a lesser interesting topic. Also, take note, no, that when you do interviews, you don't ask personal questions first. You try to start with an impersonal tone, with a general tone, going to specific, no, or a more personal approach. In that way, you will gain trust, no, from your interviewee, thus making your questioning, your conversation a more fruitful one. Okay? Now, let's go back to questionnaire. Now, questionnaires should also be applicable, no? Yung kanyang readability should be applicable to the type of person or the level of the person's understanding. So it can be measured using the Flesch reading is formula, the FAG scale level, or Flesch Kincaid grade level. These are readability statistics, no, of a particular questionnaire. Okay? Just make sure that when you administer questionnaires, it can be completed in 10 minutes or less time. Okay? Because it should not be too tedious, no, to the time, no, nung sa sasagot. Okay? And should not be longer than 2 to 3 pages. So the desirable length for a question should be less than 20 words. No? Hindi naman po kayo nagpapa-exam. Okay? So you are asking question, collecting data from a voluntary respondent. If you will require them to read a question that is more than 20 words, no, chances are i-disregard niya yung questionnaire ninyo. Okay? So here are some of the readability statistics. No? I will not ask you to compute for readability statistics. Okay? But for this one, I want to point out that the Flesch reading is formula, the value of 0 to 1 will fall under 0 to 100 or fall between 0 to 100. Okay? The higher the score, no, the higher the number, the easier your text, no, to read. The easier the text is to read. Okay? The higher the number. Now, your flesh reading is formulas na has this following range, no? Scores between 90 to 100 are considered easily understandable by an average fifth grader, while those that fall 60 to 70 are considered easily understood by 8 to 9 graders, while those falling under 0 to 30 are considered easily understandable by college graduates. The Flesch-Kincaid grade level tells you, or this readability statistic tells you what grade level would your sentence be understood. No? So usually, magpo-fall yan ng grades 1 to 16. No? The range would be around 1 to 16. Okay? So, pag sinabing ang Flesch-Kincaid grade level mo ay 6.5, it can be read by a 6th grader. So how can you use that, or how can you use your readability statistic? It's actually available in your Microsoft Word. No? Just highlight the text, no, that you want to generate your statistics. Punta lang kayo sa review, meron dong readability statistics na option. Okay? Another readability statistic is yung FOG, or the Gunning Fogs Index. So the Gunning Fog Index is a readability statistic that tells you na the higher the level of your gunning fog, kasi nga fog, the higher the fog, the more vague the sentence is. No? The lower the fog, the easier it is, no, to understand. Okay? So ito yung Sarakabay Baby. Ang kanyang gunning fog index ay 3.1. So it means that this particular sentence can actually be understood easily. No? Yung nursery rhyme na Rockabye Baby. So make sure that when you do your questionnaire, you be considerate of the wordings, the type of questions that you use. You should also consider the translation and also anticipate social desirability bias. When we say social desirability bias, the tendency of a person to give a socially desirable response, no, to your questionnaire. For example, if they were asked, do you smoke? No? And you are asking students, since it is socially desirable for students not to smoke, they will respond not smoking to your questionnaire. So be aware, no, of social desirability bias, and also be aware of response set bias. When we say response set bias, this is the bias, no, or the tendency of a person to answer a single set, no, of response because tinatamad siya magsagot ng questionnaire mo. No? For example, sinagutan lang niya dahil he's too busy to answer your questionnaire, but he's afraid, no? He's afraid to turn down your request. Okay? There is a tendency that he will reply only a single statement or a single score on your questionnaire. Okay? So that is a response set bias. It does not reflect the true feelings or true response of that person, but rather a reflection of his preference to answer in set. Okay? So when you do questionnaires, also remember the principle of mutual exclusivity and exhaustiveness. Now, one of the questions that you can use in your questionnaire can be a close-ended questions, no? So your close-ended questions can come in different forms, no? If you are given two choices, no, to answer for your question, that is a dichotomous questionnaire or dichotomous close-ended question. If you are given choices, no, you are given choices as if you're in a cafeteria, no, pipili ka na lang, tuturo mo na lang kung anong sagot. That is a cafeteria close-ended question. Okay? Like this one. What is your opinion of CHED announcement to limit the number of students going to a nursing course? Ito yon. You're given the choices. Okay? You choose between the choice. Okay? That is a cafeteria question kasi inaalok ka lang kung ano yung mga possible na sagot. Well, in fact, may iba pa namang sagot, di ba? Another is yung tinatawag na rank order, no? Rank order questioning, where you try to rank the choices from 1 to 3 based on your preference or whatsoever criteria. Another is a forced choice, no? It's like a dichotomous question, but then it refers to something more than a dichotomous question. So you're only forced to have two, no? Well, in fact, there are other choices as well. Another types would be your multiple choice, your checklist, and composite scales. Now, scales can be in different forms, no, as well. When we say rating scales, these are scales na we try to answer along a continuum of responses, no? Sometimes increasing continuum. So, for example, when the nurse talks to me, she touches me, no? You're given the choice of A, never, B, sometimes, C, frequently, D, always. Okay? So there's an increment, as you can see, and also there are categories, okay, in increasing order. So that's a rating scale. Okay? A Likert scale, on the other hand, is slightly different from rating scale. Likert scale also appears in a continuum, but then it only is used, no, to reflect agreement on a certain statement. So, Likert scale are best characterized by words such as agree, strongly disagree, uncertain, etc. So those are Likert scales, no? Because Likert scales are always used to reflect agreement on a certain statement. When we say semantic differential scales, these are scales that use two bipolar adjectives. Bipolar, ibig sabihin, they are completely opposite of each other. And then they were put in a scale. Now, these adjectives sometimes answer, or more often, are answers to your question na ini-scalan mo or mini-measure mo. So, for example, what is the attitude of your nurse? No? There are two bipolar adjectives on this semantic scale, which is caring and uncaring on the other hand. So, this will be reflected, or this will be the line between them, and you will ask your respondent to check, no, kung saan mas malapit yung characteristic ng nurse niya. So that is a semantic differential scale. You differentiate two, you try to measure the variable by using an adjective that is bipolar or completely opposite of each other. Now, another type of scale is yung tinatawag na visual analog scale. In a visual analog scale, you try to ask a certain client, no, on his perception of a certain thing, no, and try to identify in a certain line, usually around 100 millimeter in length, no. Tapos you will ask your client to point where yung kanyang response is. So if the client points here and you measured around 40 millimeters, so that would be 40 over 100 over 100% ng response niya. So that reflects, no, a quantifiable measure of his response. As for this case or example, the pain scale or pain level of the client. So kung 40 yung pagkaka-measure mo or pinoint niya sa 40 and you measured it around 40, you divide it by 100, the level is around 40% pain. Okay? Vignette, on the other hand, are brief descriptions of events, situations to which you are asked to react. Now, these situations are fictitious or factual, no? Which are structured to elicit you or to elicit a perception on you or an opinion or a knowledge, no? How people might behave, no? You in situations that would be difficult to observe in daily life, no? Usual question or the usual examples for vignettes are when you are asked, no, if you were the person, no, sa katayuan ni ganito, how will you react? Okay? So you're given a situation, then you were asked, how will you react? Then that's a sample of vignette. Okay? So here's a sample of a vignette. No, you can read this. No, you try to do it on yourself. Okay, it's in your lecture notes. You can go back into this, try to answer. No, and notice how it will elicit a response from you. Okay. The next type of self-reports are what you call your projective tests. Now, projective tests are examinations that delve or dive in to your unconscious or subconscious, rather, to your subconscious. Because sometimes it's difficult to get a truthful response because of faking, di ba? But projective tests try to dive in what's inside of you. So it may be in the form of word association, sentence completion, figure drawing, or showing pictures to you, no? Yung tinatawag na Rorschach ink blot test, no? Yung ink blot na may blot ng ink tapos ipapa-interpret sa what do you see? So that's a Rorschach ink blot test. Or a thematic apperception test where you will be asked to interpret, no, in your own words, your feelings about a certain picture. Role play is another projective test, no, that you can use to elicit subconscious response, no, or truthful response. Just make sure that when you use projective test, it should be appropriate to the age of the person and also appropriate to his cognitive ability, no, pati yung kanyang perceptual ability, yung kakayahang makabasa, makasulat, makarinig, no. So you have to administer it properly to them so that you'll get what you need. No? You will get the data that you need. So here's an example of your Philippine thematic apperception test. No? You will be asked, no, to interpret this picture. Marami yan. And this picture, and another one, so on and so forth. So these are examples of thematic apperception test images. You can also use other other pictures, no, that may invoke, no, an emotive response or a response that is something deep seated. So you can use other, but these are some of the recommended figures. All right. Another type of data collection method is to use a biophysiologic measure. When we say biophysiologic measures, these are measurements that come from your body, no, or can come from biomechanical devices. Now these are more objective, no? These measurement are more objective and more specific, no? Kasi diretsa mong tinitignan yung value using a machine, using a unit of measurement, and it's more precise. Okay? There are two forms of biophysiologic measure. One is in vivo, meaning sa loob ng katawan, kinuha yung measurement. Okay? So an example of this will be your thermometer, your temperature, your body temperature, your pulse rate, no? Your blood pressure, no? Your respiratory rate. Because these are in vivo measures, nasa loob siya ng katawan. Pag sinabing in vitro fertilization, in vitro measurements, these are done outside your body, no? So when you get a sample of a tissue or sample of your blood outside of your body and you measured it measure it, no, using a machine outside the body, that's an in vitro measure or an in vitro biophysiologic measure. Okay, so ang key term, kapag in vitro, sa labas ng katawan ginawa yung measurement. Another type of data collection method is the use of available data or records. Okay? It can be, now available data or records are also precise way. However, you can only have access to those records, no, that only survive. So this is usually done for historical researches, no? Because you only have access, no, to data that are that tell you of the history. Okay? So the available data or records are also a reliable way of collecting data if it is complete. Okay? Other types of data collection methods can be in the form of cognitive tests, no? Like your intelligence test, aptitude, achievement test, personality test, neuropsychological tests. Okay? So I try to identify the best data collection method for this for these situations. Number one, human behavior when faced with this greatest fear. This can be done, or this is best observed, or the data about this one can be best collected by an observation. Okay? Number two, number of nursing student enrollees in the last 5 years can be best answered by, since we're pertaining to history because of the word last 5 years, no, this can be identified or can be collected, or can the data about this can be collected through a records review or through the use of available records or data. Number three, child abuse among mental retardates. Okay? Since it's difficult to get data from retardates, no, because they may not be cooperative, no, uh, they may not join you easily. It may be difficult to get their trust. We have to use, what method that will invoke interest among them. It cannot be an interview, no, but rather in the form of a projective test. No? Pwede mo siyang pagawin ng figure drawing, pwede mo siyang pwede mo siyang pakitaan ng role playing or whatsoever. Okay? Number four will be can be measured, no? Yung weight reduction program, yung effect niya can be best measured by a biophysiologic measure. So titimbangin yung respondent. Okay? Now we're done with data collection method. Now we go to the quality, no, of your research process or design, or what we call your rigor. When we say rigor, we try to follow, no, the strictest process of data collection and analysis. Okay? Now, quantitative designs would require you to have statistical conclusion validity, a good internal and external validity of your research design. While quantitative studies, it can be in the form of, another aspect of rigor that we should look into is yung tinatawag na practicality, reliability and validity, sensitivity and specificity of your instruments. When we say practicality, this is the appropriateness of your study. Mainly it pertains to your cost. No? It can take in the form of also in the characteristic of your tools, like your length, the time, the directions, the format, the language, training to administer and interpret, etc. And also the respondent characteristics, or the literacy, the physical and mental stamina, motor skills, language abilities, transitory conditions, and the likes. Even environmental conditions can also affect the practicality of your research. No? While reliability, on the other hand, pertains to the ability of your instrument to create reproducible results given the same context, circumstance, and conditions, no, when you administer the tool. So this reliability is concerned with characteristics such as dependability, consistency, accuracy, and comparability. It can be expressed in the form of coefficient of correlation, how well correlated the variables are or the questions are with each other. Having a perfect reliability na may coefficient of 1, kapag ang coefficient ng reliability ay 1, you can say that it has perfect reliability. While those above 0.7 is considered satisfactory. Now, there are aspects, no, or dimensions of reliability. It can be in the form of stability, no? Equivalence, or yung pagkakapareho ng dalawa, or it can be in the form of internal consistency. Ibig sabihin yung pagkaka-connect at pagkaka-relate ng bawat item sa isang questionnaire. When we talk of stability o yung uh, um, uh, consistency ng isang questionnaire, no, throughout time, this can be measured using a test-retest reliability. Okay? Pag sinabing test-retest reliability, your instrument should be administered to person A. Then after 2 weeks, that same instrument will be administered to person A. Now, if their scores are correlated to each other using Pearson product, okay, kapag ang correlation niya ay greater than 0.7, it is a reliable instrument. Or a correlation instrument or a correlation coefficient of 1 would say that you have an instrument with a perfect reliability. Another type of reliability is yung tinatawag na equivalence. Okay? It can be in the form of alternate or parallel forms wherein your instrument A, okay? Instrument A, tapos yung kaparehan niyang instrument, no, na established will be administered to one person. Tapos yung sagot ng one person na yun sa instrument A and instrument B mo will be correlated. Again, if it's greater than 0.7, it's a reliable instrument. If not, no, then you try to look for a new instrument. Another type is yung tinatawag na inter-rater reliability. The word itself would tell you that this involves two raters, no, or 2 or 3 raters. But for this example, we focus on 2 raters. If person A use, no, or rate a certain object and the same way as person B, if their percentage of agreement o yung pagkakapareho ng kanilang mga sagot ay more than 70%, you can say that your instrument has high inter-rater reliability. But if you use intra-rater reliability, ibig sabihin yung reliability na kapag sinagutan ng isang tao ay equivalent pa rin yung lalabas na result. It's done something like this. A person A rates the object or event A, then after a certain time, it's the person A rates object event A. Okay? If that's the case, no, if the percentage of agreement of the first and second rating is 70% and above, you can say that your tool has good intra-rater reliability. The third dimension of reliability is yung tinatawag na homogeneity or internal consistency o yung pagkakakonect-connect ng bawat question ng isang questionnaire. It can be in the form of split half technique wherein you try to divide, no, your questionnaire into 2 different parts. No? Hindi ibig sabihin kung ang questionnaire mo ay 1 to 20, hindi mo siya hatiin ng 1 to 10, 11 to 20. No? Hindi pa pwede. Pwedeng ganon pero malabo yung pagiging reliable nun. So one of the best way will be to divide the tool between odd-numbered questions to even-numbered questions. Now, administer that 2 halves, no? 2 halves to your respondent, and if it is correlated, no, but mataas sa 0.7, you can say that it has good split half homogeneity. Okay? It can be also used, you can also use your Cronbach alpha. Okay? So your Cronbach alpha is a statistical test wherein you try to divide, no, the items in all possible ways. May formula yan, no? May Excel file, no? So pag mataas ang Cronbach alpha mo sa 0.7 or 0.7 and above, you have good, no, internal consistency. Always take note that Cronbach alpha is only used for data or for instruments or for research instruments with interval level of data or at the interval level of data or measurement. Okay? You can use Kuder-Richardson if your data is a dichotomous data. Alright? Now, we're done with reliability. We will now talk about validity, which concerns with the ability of your data or instrument to measure what it claims to measure. Kumbaga, if your pain scale is valid, it should measure pain perceived by the client. So this pertains to the truthfulness of a measurement of an instrument. It can be assessed by using face or armchair validity, content validity, criterion, and construct validity. When we say face or armchair validity, face, ibig sabihin, on the surface, sa pag-unang tingin. Okay? Mukha bang tool ang iyong tool? So face or armchair validity is looking about the directions, the clarity of your tool. If it has instructions, if you ask question on a scale, there is a scale. Okay, so that's face or armchair validity. Another type of validity is yung tinatawag na content validity. When we say content validity, it refers to the adequacy of the items inside your questionnaire or instrument. Now, the adequacy of items should cover all the scope of your construct that you are measuring. No? Usually, this is determined by a content validity index, which is obtained from a panel of experts and compute the relevance rating scale. Okay? Another type of validity is yung tinatawag na criterion validity. Sa criterion validity, it can be two. A concurrent validity or a predictive validity. Pag sinabing concurrent validity, your tool that measures a certain construct, certain variable, you compare it with a present rate, na similar doon na pinag-aaralan mo, Okay? Or you compare it with a well-established tool. So for example, you try to measure the nursing competence of level 4 students. Okay? If you try to measure it using a certain questionnaire, when you do a concurrent validity, i-compare mo siya sa certain present rate ng nung mga respondents mo about that nursing competence. So kung level 4 yan, dapat i-measure mo yung kanyang or compare mo yung result ng instrument mo sa kanilang grades sa RLE, sa academic performance, because that's a present rate, and if it's correlated to each other, then we can say it has good concurrent validity. But when you say predictive validity, you compare your instrument to a future trait, So for example, you want to measure the nursing competence, by a certain tool ng level 4 students. But then you want to know whether this is predictive of their future trait, which is, ano ba ang measure kapag sila ay graduate na? Yung kanilang board exam scores. So if your questionnaire is correlated with a future trait, which is the results of their NLE, then that questionnaire has good predictive validity. So you look into a future trait. Ang tanong, should that future trait be about dun sa trait ng level 4 students? Not necessarily. Kasi paano mo magagawa yung study mo about the predictive validity nito kung hihintayin mo pang graduate yung mga pag-aaralan mo. So pwede mo namang kumuha ng ibang trait doon sa kanilang or kumuha ng sample sa ibang batch, to get the future to connect the nursing competence and their future trait. Another type of validity, which is the most stringent validity, is your construct validity. It can be in the form of contrast or known group. In contrast or known group, an instrument, no, should differentiate, no, should differentiate what is or who will be scoring low for this measurement, or who will measure high or will score high for this measurement. So contrast or known group, magkahiwalay. So for example, you're trying to measure functional ability. You administer this tool on functional ability on a group of athletes. So these athletes, we all know that their functional ability can be high, no, lalo na sa physical ability or physical function. If their functional ability is high, then we can say that your tool is valid because it measures high for a known group. No? If you contrast it with another group, no, which is, let's say for example, those who are physically disabled, no? So yung physical functional ability nila can be scored low because they have handicap, or they are handicapped. Okay? So construct validity, or the contrast or known group procedure, measures the difference between two known groups, no, which are highly contrasting on a particular measure. Another type of construct validity is yung tinatawag na convergent validity, or the correlations between two different methods measuring the same trait. Okay, different methods of measuring a construct that yields to similar result, and to assess the degree to which two methods of measuring a construct are similar. Okay? So yung pagkakapareho, inabanggit dito yung pagkakapareho ng measurement ng dalawang variable. And also the discriminant validity, which is able to differentiate the construct from other similar construct. How different is this construct with other constructs measuring the same variable? So if it's able to discriminate what is talaga doon sa tool na yon, then it has high discriminant construct validity. Now, here are some reminders on the relationship of reliability and validity. Now, reliability values are influenced by these following factors. No? The number of items on the instrument. So the more the number or the more items you have in your questionnaire, the higher the reliability. No? On the second factor that influences reliability values are the heterogeneity of your subjects. No? Or the more homogeneous your respondents or subjects, the lower the reliability. Now, reliability is always considered first because it is a necessary condition for validity. Okay? So a valid instrument therefore must be valid, because a measuring device that is unreliable cannot possibly be valid. Yun nga lang, high reliability is not necessarily congruent with validity. We can say that an instrument can be very reliable but have no validity at all. Because another one is that no instrument is completely valid or reliable, because what it measures in terms of it measures in terms of degrees of a measure rather than the validity or reliability that exists. And lastly, an instrument may be valid in one situation but not in another. So there can be the validity only applies for a certain situation, and reliability applies only for one situation but not on the other or other similar construct. Okay? Another type of or another concept in ensuring rigor in our studies is to determine the sensitivity and specificity of our instrument. When we say sensitivity, this is the ability of our instrument to identify a true case, a true positive. While specificity is the ability to discriminate non-cases, okay, or correctly screen out those without the condition, or which one that yields true negatives. Okay? In qualitative designs, iba naman ang usapan sa validity and reliability. In qualitative designs or researches, the main concept that we should always take note is yung tinatawag na trustworthiness, no? Or the honesty of data collected from our participants, okay? Or by following protocols. The criteria for trustworthiness can come in the form of credibility, apat yun ha, credibility, dependability, confirmability, and transferability. So when you if you decide to do a qualitative study in your chapter 3, I expect that you address, there's a certain section where you should assure, assure the readers that you have addressed these 4 criteria of trustworthiness. So the first criteria of trustworthiness is yung tinatawag na credibility, confidence in the truth of the data and interpretations of them. Dapat totoo yung nakukuha mong data. So credibility is somehow similar to validity in quantitative study kasi this pertains to the truthfulness of the data, that you are confident that it is true. How do you ensure credibility of your data? By engaging in prolonged engagement. Ibig sabihin, magbababad ka sa pagkuha ng data from your respondents. You try to observe every movement as possible so that you can verify whether your observations are right or wrong. All right? So there should be prolonged engagement and persistent observation. Number 2, it can be achieved by using triangulation. When we say triangulation, you use multiple referents to draw conclusion about the truth. It can be, triangulation can be done through the use of your data source. Iko-compare mo yung nakuha mong data from different sources na kinunan mo ng data. So for example, you get data about nahihirapan sa online classes from one student. You triangulate it by comparing your observation on the first student with the second student and the third student. That's triangulation by data source. So if you compare these data sources, you triangulate it with data sources, you are actually ensuring credibility. Kasi baka mamaya, iba-iba yung sagot nila. Baka mamaya nagkaiba dahil manipulate yung data ng isang respondent. Okay? It can also be achieved, yung triangulation, by use of investigator triangulation. When we say investigator triangulation, you try to validate your data with some other investigators na nag-undergo din ng same data collection process, same topic as you. So it can also be used, triangulation, by comparing your data with theory, with an established a system of explanation of phenomena, or a method triangulation. When we say method, the process of how you collected your data. Credibility can be also achieved by member checking. So member checking involves going back to the source of data if your interpretation, if your data collection is true or similar to what they perceive. Babalikan mo yung kinunan mo ng data para i-confirm sa kanya kung tama ba yung pinaggagawa mo sa interpretation mo or sa pagsulat mo ng data. Okay? It can also be assured by peer debriefing, search for disconfirming evidence or negative case analysis, or a research, or even looking at the researcher's credibility. Another type of or another dimension of trustworthiness is yung tinatawag na dependability or the data stability over time and over conditions. With this said, this is similar to reliability in quantitative studies. Okay? So this can be achieved by two steps. It can be a stepwise replication, wherein researchers divide into two teams and deal with data sources separately and conduct two independent inquiries, data conclusions compared after. So two teams will collect data, hahatiin sa dalawa. They will collect their own and then no, they try to replicate what they did over the other group and then compare their findings, no? Compare data. It can also be dependability can also be done or achieved by an inquiry audit. Pag sinabing inquiry audit, scrutiny of the data and supporting documents by an external reviewer. So a person outside from your research team or outside your paper will try to review, no, what you have done. And if there are some deviations, no, i-report niya sa'yo and then try to correct it so that dependability can be achieved. The third dimension of trustworthiness is what you call your confirmability or the objectiveness or neutrality of your data. So kung gaano ka-objective ang inyong data, yan ang pinag-uusapan sa confirmability. So in confirmability, dito lalabas yung inyong subjectiveness, no? Kung ang inyong bias, kung ang inyong reflexivity ay nakakaapekto doon sa inyong data collection. So in confirmability, you can achieve this by bracketing or reflexive journaling. This is usually used in phenomenological studies. Now, pag sinabing bracketing, you try to identify what are your misconceptions, what are your prejudices, no? What are your judgmental attitudes, no? And try to write it down so that you'll be aware of it, no? And even doing a reflexive journal. Another is yung audit and decision trail, no? Documentation of decisions taken during data collection and analysis. Okay? The fourth one, or the fourth dimension of trustworthiness is transferability, no? Or the extent to which your findings are applicable to a different group or in a different setting. With this said, this is similar to generalizability in quantitative studies. Now, transferability can be achieved by having or keeping thick descriptions. So these are your notes, no? These are your description of your research setting, transactions and processes na nag-transpire, no, during your research data collection process, no? And that you should have observed it during the inquiry to permit judgments about contextual similarities. That would end my lecture for data collection methods. I hope that you have learned something from me, and if you have any questions, you may send a message to my messenger account. If you need to, or if you want to start a discussion in our Facebook group, you may do so. Okay, I hope you learned again from me, and I end this lecture and have a nice week.